Hello everyone, today my team and I will be presenting our project. So let's start with our main research question, which is how has the rise of streaming platforms impacted the appeal of cinema attendance among HSC BA students? So to make more precise links within our data, we chose to analyze responses by separating participants based on gender. This allowed us to formulate a more specific sub-question, which is, do women tend to go to the cinema more often than men? Now moving on to our biases and limitation. So when studying human behavior, one important factor to consider is of course the selection bias. Furthermore, participation was voluntary, and since we could not force anyone to respond, only volunteers took part. There was also a sampling bias, so even though we attempted to balance the gender of our participants by reviewing the results in real time during data collection, we were not able to verify participants' gender, nor were in a position to reject someone from participating based on that. So now moving on to our methodology. So for data collection, we use a simple random sampling method without replacement, and we collected our data by directly approaching HSC students in HSC. So after performing the necessary calculations, we decided to use a confidence level of 95%, a margin of error of 10%, and a population size of 97 students. In the end, we gathered 101 responses, which we considered close enough for our needs. Now moving on to the variables. So to analyze this, we looked at two variables. So X, which was the gender of the participant, and Y, the participant's tendency to go to the cinema often. So for variable Y, we selected the most relevant question among the ones we asked, which was, as of today, how often do you go to the cinema yearly? So although we initially included other questions in the survey, we focused solely on this one question that was most directly related to cinema attendance. And to analyze our responses, we transformed the answers to the questions into qualitative categories. So if participants answered from 1 to 6, they were classified as not going often to the cinema and vice versa. So now moving on to our hypothesis test. So we decided to perform a one-tailed test using the following hypothesis. So the null hypothesis was the proportion of women who go to the cinema often is less than or equal to the proportion of men, and the alternative hypothesis was the proportion of women who go to the cinema often is greater than that of men, and all the conditions were verified. Now moving on to our results. So we conducted a test on the proportions of two independent samples, and we obtained a p-value of 7.0 to the power of -7. So this extremely low p-value allows us to reject the null hypothesis at a 5% significance level. Therefore, we conclude that the proportion of women who go to the cinema often is significantly higher than that of men. Now, moving on to our analysis. So, if we take a quick look at the proportions, we see that it supports our results. So, there's clearly a concentration um, to the left for men, and women, it is more diversified. So, we can see that only four men are categorized as going often to the cinema, which represent 3.96%, and only 33 participants out of 101, so 32.5%, are categorized with often visits to the cinema. Also, there were 29 women who go out of 33 participants who go often to the cinema, which represents 87.88%. So if we compare by gender, we see that 4 men out of 50, so 8%, go often to the cinema, and 29 women out of 51, so 57% of women go often to the cinema. So, to conclude, cinema is less and less popular, and women tend to go more often to the cinema than men. And finally, we also recognize that our study could have been improved, especially in terms of the survey questions. So, the fact that we were only able to use 1 out of 5 questions shows that we may have asked the wrong questions. Thank you for listening.